We're looking at the first generation of children living shorter lives than their parents. Heart disease, the number 2 killer of Brits, reversible with a plant-based diet. We had the cure, yet hundreds of thousands of people continue to die.
I look across the Atlantic, Americans more obese than ever, on their way to death. Why aren't people listening?
Well, they're just confused. They don't know. And the industry wants it that way. I mean, the system runs off of chronic disease. How many billions of dollars corporations are going to save because life expectancy is dropping for the first time in the States? Talk about perverse financial incentive. We are as certain processed meat causes cancer in human beings than we are that plutonium causes cancer in cigarette smoke and asbestos. You want to smoke? Smoke. You want to eat meat? Eat meat. But recognize what this might be doing to your family.
This week on the show, we have Dr. Michael Greger, who is a physician, best-selling author, and speaker who advocates a whole foods, plant-based diet in order not to die. And that's the name of his latest book, How Not to Die. And he goes through the 15 leading causes of death and how they can be prevented by eating plants and to get off our diet of animal proteins and dairy. And look, you might not be a vegan or a vegetarian. I know I wasn't for a long time, but it's hard to deny the science that this is a healthier way of living. And ever since I've been doing more body movement, I try to do a meatless Monday, and I really try to incorporate these things into my life and my diet. And the science is there, and it's very hard to argue with Dr. Greger, and he's really compelling. His website, nutritionfacts.org, is a purely nonprofit way to show you how you can incorporate this stuff into your life. And I believe it's a game changer. I think 50 or 100 years from now, we all will be eating a majority of plant food. So listen to him. He's super entertaining. He's lots of fun. And I think you're going to learn something about your diet. And again, just try it. Try 1 day, 2 days a week of a plant-based diet and see how it goes for you. I'm doing the same thing, and I absolutely love it. And I'm also loving all the action going on inside the London Real Academy, because we're about to launch our Speak to Inspire program. It's a 6 weeks where I show you how to talk, how to public speak like some of the greatest guests on London Real, how you can take your message and start on a mission, how you can take your message to the stage, how you can do better at work in the boardroom and with clients by speaking to inspire. So go in there, check it out. I got tons of free content and free video. And if you want to join me for 6 weeks of accountability to transform who you are, then jump on in and do it. And now I leave you with Dr. Michael Greger. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Dr. Michael Greger, the physician, best-selling author, and speaker who advocates a plant-based, whole foods diet to reverse and prevent fatal disease and illness. You're a graduate of Cornell University and the Tufts University School of Medicine, and your New York Times best-selling book, How Not to Die, examines the 15 top causes of death in America. You've appeared in numerous documentary films, including What the Health, Prescription Nutrition, and Eating You Alive. And your website, nutritionfacts.org, has thousands of videos giving research-based advice about specific foods and health-related issues. Dr. Greger, welcome to London Real.
I'm so excited to be here.
I am excited to have you. I was wondering, before we get into all this good stuff, and we got a lot to talk about, when you're about to land in London Heathrow and you're thinking, okay, I'm going back to see the Brits, how do we rank in the world when it comes to our diets compared to, say, the Yanks or third world countries or anything? How are we doing here?
Well, like the U.S., according to the Global Burden of Disease Study, which is the largest study of disease risk factors in human history, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the #1 cause of death and disability among Britons is the British diet. And the same thing in the United States, the American diet. #1 cause of death, bumping tobacco smoking to #2. Now, cigarettes only kill 500,000 Americans every year, whereas our diet kills hundreds of thousands more. So when you think about, physical inactivity, not getting enough exercise, smoking, all that ranks below diet, both in the UK and in the US. But that's great news. That means we have tremendous control over our health, destiny, and longevity. The vast majority of premature death and disability is preventable with a plant-based diet and other healthy lifestyle behaviors. So that's great.
Okay, and so most G20 countries are suffering from the same problem. They've got an abundance of foods, they're making the wrong choices. Is that usually what's happening?
Yeah, and so infectious diseases. So people used to die of infectious disease. You go back 100 years ago, right? The leading cause of death of things like pneumonia. That was before antibiotics. So now, and modern medicine is great with those kind of acute conditions. You have an infection, antibiotics can cure you. You have a broken legs, we can set it. There's all sorts of neat surgeries that you can do. But for chronic disease, and that's really what's, these are the plagues, these are the kind of the pandemics of diabetes and obesity and heart disease and hypertension. That's what's killing us now, and unfortunately, medicine has little to offer, right? We can kind of slow down the rate at which you die from diabetes. We can slow down the rate at which you go blind, at which you lose your kidney function, go on dialysis, slow down the rate at which you, get lower limb amputations. But in terms of stopping the disease, preventing the disease in the first place, or reversing the disease, unfortunately, mainstream medicine has very little to offer because these are lifestyle diseases, right? So yeah, you can treat the symptoms. You can artificially lower people's blood pressures with blood pressure medications, but why not treat the cause in the first place, which is these inflamed, crippled arteries, because primarily what we're eating, although certainly cigarette smoke plays a role too. So, but lifestyle diseases, if that's what causes it, you can't eat the same foods that cause the disease if you expect to stop and reverse it. But that's the exciting thing, is that many of the leading killers, so here, heart disease, the #2 killer of Brits, preventable, arrestable, reversible with a plant-based diet. And we've known this. This is the shocking, all right? So The Lancet, probably the most prestigious medical journal in the world, published here in the UK, July 23rd, 1990. Published Dr. Dean Ornish's lifestyle heart trial. That was really the landmark trial that proved for the first time ever, using something called quantitative angiography, that indeed heart disease could be reversed. Arteries opened up without drugs, without surgery, just a plant-based diet and lifestyle program. Since that day, no one else should have died in this or any other country from heart disease. We had the cure, yet hundreds of thousands of people continue to die from this preventable, arrestable, reversible condition, right? #11 killer Brits, type 2 diabetes. #12 killer Brits, high blood pressure. These are diseases that can be reversed, cured through diet and lifestyle changes alone. So why do people continue to die? People should be upset, should be angry that, wait a second, are you telling me my, father didn't have to die? Wait a second, he had type 2 diabetes, got worse, and died, right? Unfortunately, doctors aren't taught nutrition, right? There's this, doctors suffer from a severe nutrition deficiency in education. We just weren't taught about this, and so we kind of graduate without this powerful tool in our medical toolbox. And so that's why I've kind of made it my mission to get out there and show physicians that they have a broader array of tools and go directly to the patients themselves. When it comes to safe, side effect-free, simple solutions like stopping smoking, eat healthy, you don't need your doctor to tell you to do that. You can, take control of your own life and your family's health.
And you are on a mission. And like the titles of the chapters of these books are pretty plain and simple. How not to die from heart disease, how not to die from lung disease, how not to die from brain diseases, how not to die from diabetes. And it's all about advocating this plant-based diet. Is that correct?
Plant-based diet and lifestyle. So I talk about exercise, I talk about the importance of smoking cessation, I talk about, sleep, but certainly diet is the number one most powerful thing we can do in terms of modulating our risk for chronic disease.
Okay, I look across the Atlantic, Americans more obese than ever, on their way to death, more information than ever, more money than ever. Why aren't people listening? Is it because they ultimately don't want to be told what to eat? They don't like their pleasures? Or they're just not educated? What is it? Because you're beating your head against a wall. It seems like it's bloody, but you're still doing it, getting your message out there. What ultimately you think it keeps people from just taking those changes?
Right. Well, they're just confused. They don't know. And the industry wants it that way. This is a standard tobacco industry tactic. Muddy the water, misinformation, right? Such that, so one day coffee is good for you, one day coffee is bad for you. Time magazine put "butter is back" on the cover. Shows you how desperate they are for dwindling print sales, right? Sells a lot of copies, but sells the public short, right? And so people love hearing good news about bad habits, right? I mean, someone comes out with a diet book saying, broccoli is really good for you. How many books is that going to sell, right? Someone comes out and says bacon and butter is really good for you. You got a bestseller on you. I mean, and the media loves those kind of stories, right? I mean, and so there's just these conflicting, and so the processed food industry, which is $1 trillion industry, they just hope to confuse people so they'll throw up their hands, eat whatever's put in front of them. I mean, that's good for business, but not so good for people. Whereas if you look at the science, there's a remarkable global scientific consensus as to the core elements of healthy living going back decades. So, I mean, the scientific record isn't confused, just the way it's translated out to the public by these moneyed commercial interests, that the message is lost along the way.
Is it a conspiracy by these industries, or are they just looking in their best interest because they're just trying to maximize profits?
That's just the way the symptom works. I mean, the CEO of Coca-Cola doesn't say, "How do I make kids fat today?" Right? It's like, no, it's how do I make my shareholders happy in this quarter, right? Short-term profits for shareholders, right? Even if that CEO said, I care about my kids, I'm not going to do this anymore, they'd be kicked out. I mean, that's the whole purpose of a corporation, maximize, return for their shareholders. How do you do that? Okay, well, you take something with dirt cheap ingredients, right? It's sugar water. In fact, sugar that's subsidized by U.S. taxpayers in the States, right? So it's artificially cheap sugar, and it's what? So it's a few pennies to make, and then you sell for a few bucks a bottle. That's how you make money, right? But something like produce, fruits and vegetables, it's perishable. It goes bad. It rots on the shelf. You put a Twinkie, it can be on the shelf for a couple weeks. But I mean, you can't make money. It's not a branded product. There's no markup. So the healthiest foods, the system is just set up to reward companies selling people junk. And unfortunately, and even in the government level, we're subsidizing the worst foods. We're subsidizing sugar, subsidizing feed crops so we can have dollar menu burgers, whereas why aren't we subsidizing fruits and vegetables, right? So unfortunately the system, so that's why we need to take control over our lives, over our family's health, and really kind of take it back. So the information is there, but unfortunately lost in this cloud of commercial influence.
Talk to me about the life of Michael Greger. You are kind of a one-man crusader, going around constantly speaking on this. You've been doing this for, near 20 years? And you're constantly on the road, even though you told me earlier, I hate traveling. But you're still doing this. You refuse to accept sponsorships. You have the site.org. It's all about free information.
Sure.
Wow. What makes this man tick, and why are you doing this?
Right. There's no ads, no commercials, no corporate sponsorship, strictly not commercial, not selling anything, just put it up as a public service. It's kind of a labor of love. And I do it as a tribute to my grandmother, whose own life was saved through evidence-based nutrition. So, I mean, when I was a kid growing up, my grandmother, Frances Greger, was diagnosed with end-stage heart disease. She already had so many bypass surgeries, she basically run out of plumbing at some point, nothing more they could do, all right? Confined to a wheelchair, crushing chest pain. Her life was over.
How old was she at this point?
Age 65.
65, wow.
Age 65,
Okay.
life was over.
Pretty young.
Then she heard about this guy, Nathan Pritikin, one of our early lifestyle medicine pioneers. And what happened next is actually detailed in Pritikin's biography called The Man Who Healed America's Heart. And it talks about the death's door people that showed up, like Frances Greger. It talks about her who arrived in a wheelchair. She had angina, claudication. She couldn't walk without great pain in her chest and legs. Within 3 weeks, though, she was not only out of her wheelchair, she was walking 10 miles a day. She was one of his great early success stories, right? Where it's a live-in program that put people on a plant-based diet, a graded exercise program. She was up walking around, and thanks to a healthy diet, she was given her medical death sentence at age 65. Thanks to a healthy diet, was able to enjoy another 31 years on this planet until age 96 to enjoy her 6 grandkids, including me. That's why I went to medicine, and that's why I practice the type of medicine I practice today, lifestyle medicine.
That was it. You saw grandma get better and you were like, wow, how can this happen?
Right. I mean, at the time, I just assumed, well, yeah, you go to your doctor and you get better. I mean, it was just like, oh yeah, okay. It didn't occur to me how radical that was. And at that time, they didn't even think heart disease was reversible, period. They thought it was just this inexorable, spiral to death. But Pritikin was showing back in the 70s that no, this disease could be reversed. It's a lifestyle disease. That's what causes it. Change the lifestyle. Now the hope. So there were populations. Where did Pritikin get this idea from? Right? There were populations around the world. For example, in rural Africa, there's a network of missionary hospitals set up through actually UK physicians like Dr. Dennis Burkitt, right? Who was one of the most preeminent medical figures of the 20th century. Who went down, started this network of missionary hospitals, and they were seeing millions of people, and they did not suffer from heart disease. So they didn't see any heart disease. They didn't see colon cancer. They didn't see breast cancer. They didn't see, and these were Western trained doctors, not like they didn't know what to look for. I mean, the only people they saw is, if they had some foreigner there and all, this is before they had westernized their diet. Same thing we saw in rural China, for example, where people are eating these plant-based diets. And you say, rural China, rural Africa, what's the common Venn diagram, very different diets, is that they were plant-based on a day-to-day basis, with meat only eaten on special occasions. So wait a second, how do we know it's the plant-based nature of their diets that was so effective? Because in the Western world, the only folks with such low rates of these chronic disease are those eating these strictly plant-based diets. And so you can see the same kind of cholesterol, low cholesterol levels and low blood pressures among those eating healthy. And so the hope was, let's take people with heart disease, put them on the same kind of plant-based diet, followed by populations that do not get epidemic heart disease, and hope maybe we can slow the disease down, perhaps even stop it. But instead, something miraculous happened. As soon as people stopped eating artery-clogging diets, their bodies were able to start dissolving some of that plaque away, opening up arteries without drugs, without surgery, suggesting their bodies wanted to be healthy all along, but were just never given the chance.
So you can actually reverse this stuff.
That's like, I talk about, there's actually a paper in the medical literature talking about the best kept secret in science. What's the best kept secret in medicine? Is that sometimes the body, under the right conditions, can heal itself. If you whack your shin really hard on a coffee table or something, right? You can get all red, hot, painful, swollen, inflamed, but will heal naturally if you just stand back, let your body work its magic, right? Okay. What if you whack your shin in the same place day after day? In fact, 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? You'd never heal, right? You go to your doctor and be like, oh, my shin hurts. The doctor will be like, no problem, whip out their pad, write your prescription for painkillers, right? You're still whacking your shin 3 times a day, still really hurts like heck, but feels so much better. Those pain pills on board. Thank heavens for modern medicine, right? It's like when people take nitroglycerin for crushing chest pain, right? Tremendous relief, but you're not doing anything to treat the underlying cause of the disease. Our body wants to come back to health if we let it, but if we keep re-damaging ourselves 3 times a day, we may never heal. It's like smoking. One of the most amazing things I learned in all my medical training was that within about 15 years of stopping smoking, your lung cancer risk approaches that of a lifelong non-smoker. 15 years. Isn't that amazing?
Your lungs get cleaned out.
Your lungs can clear out all that tar, and eventually it's almost as if you never started smoking at all. And every morning of our smoking life, that healing process started until wham, first cigarette of the day. re-injuring our lungs with every puff, just like we can re-injure our arteries with every bite. When all we had to do all along, the miracle cure, is just stand back, right? Let our bodies, get out of the way, let our body's natural healing processes bring us back towards health. Right? The human body's a self-healing machine. Right? Sure, you can choose moderation and hit yourself with a smaller hammer, but why beat yourself up at all?
Talk to me about the parallels you see between tobacco and this whole, crisis we went through in the 50s, 60s, 70s in America and diet. I mean, are we going to look back at this in 50 years and say was just a similar lack of knowledge when it comes to diet?
Right. So the parallel is not that there was a lack of knowledge, but the knowledge was there, but just no one knew about it, right? And so there were decades of solid science starting back in the 30s. Linking lung cancer and smoking. In fact, actually, the seminal paper that put it all together was this British doctors study, right, with Dahl and Pato. They were the ones that actually finally clinched the deal. And so it was this kind of epidemiological study that proved this, for 1958, there's a paper, Adventist study out of California, showing non-smokers 90% less lung cancer than smokers, all right? But no one knew about it because back then there wasn't this democratization of information. You couldn't go on the internet, right? If the industry could control the doctors, they could control the message, right? And so the AMA, the American Medical Association, actually went on record saying smoking was good for you. Not neutral, but actually good for you, beneficial for your health. When the Surgeon General came out with a famous report against smoking, in 1964, the AMA actually came out opposed, actually refused to endorse the Surgeon General's report. Why? Could have been because they were just handed a $10 million check from the tobacco industry? Maybe.
Did that actually happen?
That actually happened.
Okay.
So we know why the AMA was sucking up to the tobacco industry, but why weren't more individual doctors speaking up? Well, there were a few ahead of their time speaking up against industries killing millions, but why not more? Maybe it's because the majority of physicians themselves smoke. Just like the majority of physicians today continue to eat foods that are contributing to our epidemics of dietary disease. What was the AMA's rallying cry back then? Everything in moderation. They said extensive scientific studies have proven smoking in moderation, oh, that's fine. Right? Sound familiar? Right? Food industry used the same misinformation, twisting the science, right? The same scientists for hire that downplay the risk of secondhand smoke and toxic chemicals are the same hired by the National Confectioners Association to downplay the risk of candy, same hired by the meat industry to downplay the risk of meat. But the best estimates we have is that processed foods, animal foods, contribute to at least 14 million deaths every year. So those of us involved in this evidence-based nutrition revolution, we're talking about 14 million lives in the balance every year.
If I'm supposed to eat a plant-based diet, how come milk and eggs and red meat and chicken taste so good?
Well, look, I mean, the food industry, why does candy taste so good? Why does cotton candy taste so good? Well, look, it must be good for me if it tastes so. I mean, the industry has found a way, right, to kind of subvert your natural biological drive. So if you go back a few million years, right, we basically evolved in a state of famine, right? I mean, during the winter months, right? There's not a lot of this before agriculture. We couldn't store up grain, right? Yeah. So we evolved, and so that's why we evolved this insatiable taste for sweet, right? And for fatty, right? Because that's where the calories are. The calories, right?
Concentrated calories.
Concentrated calories. And salt, right? There was no salt shakers, right? There was no, potato chips out in the savannah, right? And so we had this desperate need for salt, sugar, fat. And so those are natural biological drives. So back then, our sweet sensation made us eat a lot of blueberries off the bush, right? That was a good thing for our bites. But now, right? Now we're not in a state of caloric deficiency, right? In fact, in most of the industrialized world, we actually get too many calories. Now, it's a matter of the industry has taken those same drives, turned it against us. Oh, you like sweet? How about some soda pop? Oh, you like salty? How about some chips? How you like, fatty? Well, And so before, it was a survival mechanism. Cracking open bones and scavenging for brains and bone marrow, that got us just to reproductive age to pass along our genes, right? Now, right? In fact, you could have, if you time machine airdrop some Twinkies back then, those the Twinkie Neanderthals would go on and conquer everybody else. It was a calorie deficiency, calories through any means necessary, right? But now, we don't just want to live to reproductive age, right? Now, we live old enough to actually start suffering from chronic diseases. And chronic diseases, well, then, those fatty foods, those salty foods are working against us, but of course that's what sells. But the good news is, so am I saying what? Oh, so I'm going to eat healthy, nothing's going to taste good? At first, that's true, right? I mean, so the ripest peach in the world will taste sour after a bowl of Fruit Loops. I mean, it'll just, because your taste buds are just overwhelmed, right? You all of a sudden go on a low salt diet, your doctor puts you on a low salt diet, everything for the first week tastes like cardboard, right? But what you show, I mean, you can do these kind of metabolic ward studies, lock people in a room, actually, very tightly control what people eat. So you have people salt soup to their liking, and you measure how much salt they put in, and then you put them on a low salt diet, and a few weeks later, they actually prefer less salt. And so you give them the soup that originally tasted the best. Oh, it's too salty. Oh, you don't like it, right? And so your taste buds naturally evolve. In fact, with sugar, it can happen as few as 5 days. You cut out these super sweet foods. Within 5 days, all of a sudden, natural, whole healthy foods taste good. I mean, people see me eat a sweet potato, a baked sweet potato with a little cinnamon sprinkle on top, and they're like, oh, I could never live that kind of aesthetic life. But they don't realize, no, that actually tastes good to me. Right. And in 5 days of not eating candy bars, it would actually taste good to them too. I mean, actually, I enjoy it. So you get the best of both worlds. Wait a second. It tastes good and you get to live longer, right? But you got to give it a chance to take back your taste buds from the industry that's trying to kind of supersaturate them.
Okay. Were you always completely plant-based, or at one point did you ever say, well, maybe some fish protein is okay, or maybe some game bird protein is okay? Was there any time where you were like, this might work, or were you?
Oh, well, look, it doesn't matter what you eat on your birthday or holiday, special occasions. It's the day-to-day stuff that really adds up, right? It's just like the whack your shin analogy, right? Your body has this remarkable capacity to heal. It's just when you jab it with a fork 3 times a day, every day, and it just doesn't have the chance to heal, right? I mean, there's no science in the world that you can show me that suggests that social smokers, these people, there are some people, they can pick up a few cigarettes at a party a year, right? And they never get hooked, right? No one's going to tell me that a few cigarettes a year is going to have any, measurable increase in lung cancer risk, right, over a lifetime. But the reason a doctor says no smoking at all is they're afraid that one cigarette's going to turn to 2, then it's going to turn to a pack-a-day habit. So we just tell people no smoking at all. But that's out of a recognition that it's not the one cigarette that's going to do it, right? And so the same thing, right? I mean, but on a day-to-day basis, we really should try to eat healthier. Now, I didn't grow up, so here I was as a kid, seeing this remarkable transformation from my grandmother.
Where'd you grow up?
So born in Miami.
Okay.
Then grew up out west, moved around.
Okay. Feels like a little southern accent sometimes from you.
Oh, really? No, well, I don't know. So my mom was Brooklyn, Dad was Queens, and so if anything, maybe I got a little, I don't know. In fact, I just spoke in Brooklyn. It was so nice to go back, and I showed pictures of my mom. She was part of Brooklyn Corps, the Congress on Racial Equality, and all these pictures of her getting dragged away and arrested during the Civil Rights Movement. It was a wonderful.
It's in the family.
It's in the family. No, right? We are just kind of mission-driven folks, I guess. I mean, we just see an injustice, right? And we want to make it better.
Okay. And so you said you grew up not having this diet.
Oh, yeah, no. So, I mean, for me, it was like, oh, yeah, grandma has to eat that way because she's sick. Yeah. It's a treatment for sickness. I'm young and healthy. I don't need a treatment for sick, right? It was just, and not realizing. So it really wasn't until 90 when Ornish's paper came out showing the way you can reverse heart disease, which in the States is the #1 killer of men and women. Here in the UK, it's the #2 killer after cancer. So the #1 killer of men and women can be reversed. I was like, all right, that's it. I mean, my family had seen it with their own eyes, but here it was, published in black and white, some of the most prestigious medical journals in the world. Like, the evidence at that point was just overwhelming that I couldn't ignore it. And so then started myself eating that way. And with the recognition, I should have been eating this way all along, but it just didn't kind of click that, oh, yeah, duh. I mean, if that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse the #1 or 2 killer of men and women, shouldn't that kind of be the default diet to proven otherwise? And the fact that it can also prevent, arrest, and reverse other leading killers like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure would seem to make the case for plant-based eating simply overwhelming.
What'd you eat today?
Oh my God. I actually ate really good. So on the road, it's not so easy. I find myself in an airport food court and there's not much to eat. So,
Because there's animal proteins everywhere.
I mean, it's just
salted, processed.
but no. In the hotel that we stayed in by Heathrow here had a vegetarian breakfast thing, and breakfast in the UK is what I tell everyone to eat: beans for breakfast. So I had beans and tomatoes and mushrooms, kind of the traditional kind of British breakfast, just without the sausage, without the processed meat. But in fact, I tell everyone, so I encourage people to eat legumes: beans, split peas, chickpeas, lentils 3 times a day. And so I say, beans for breakfast, eat like the Brits. So you hear me, I say, eat like beans for breakfast. But that's not, in Japan they have miso soup and they have idli in India. I mean, having legumes for breakfast is not so crazy. But in the US, like beans for breakfast, what are you talking about? But so here I can finally follow my own advice and eat like a Brit.
Okay.
So a great breakfast. And then at lunch, so I come here for the interview and just pull out my phone and look for restaurants within the 1 mile radius while I'm waiting around, and poof, 2 places show up. One, this restaurant called Redemption, whole food, plant-based. In fact, there's a sign out front that says, sugar-free, plant-based, it goes on it, free. So what do we serve? Question mark. What's in this?
Is that what it says?
It's just like water. Yeah, water.
Funny.
But no, of course, it's just. So I had this amazing dish with purple sweet potatoes and mushrooms and greens and this yellow cauliflower and black sesame seeds and a peanut sauce. It was absolutely fantastic. And so it checked off all my boxes. I have this free app, Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen, where I, on Android and iPhone, everything of course is free, where it includes how many servings of all the foods I encourage people to get into their daily diet. So beans every day, berries every day, the healthiest foods, greens every day, the healthiest vegetables, tablespoon of ground flax seeds, quarter teaspoon of turmeric, the best beverages, best sweetener, how much exercise, blah, blah, blah. And you can tick off the boxes and chart your daily product, whatever. So here I am. I could have ticked off half my boxes for the day in one lunch. And then, how about this? For dessert, there's this place called Nana Bar, right? Where it is a nice cream bar. So it's a ice cream made from frozen bananas. One ingredient, frozen bananas, put through some juicer or food processor or something, comes out like soft serve ice cream. And then they just have whole food, toppings. And the guy behind the counter gets, his mom made the granola. How cool is that? Okay, so I'm having his mom's granola on frozen banana ice cream. So whole plant-based dessert and meal, and totally random. I didn't have to do my homework. I just showed up, and where was I going to eat? Now, this doesn't happen everywhere. Sometimes I'm in Arkansas or something, and I'm living off of Taco Bell bean burritos or something. But when I'm blessed to be in a great metropolitan city like London, I can eat healthy.
You can make it happen.
Easy. I mean, I didn't even, without a second thought.
Yeah. Now, you say that you're in a plant-based diet, but you don't use the V word, the vegan word. Is there a reason not to do that?
Yeah.
And also because, I've had vegans on here and I love it, but also they have a specific culture that's also a lot of times quite combative when it comes to meat eaters and things like that. And there's the old joke, how do you know, well, when you met a vegan, give them a few minutes and they'll tell you. And so are you trying to kind of disassociate from that, or what's your read on the whole thing?
Oh, well, so as a physician, the words vegetarian, vegan, they don't tell me what you eat. It tells me what you don't eat, right? But there's lots of really garbage vegetarian food. You could live off of chips and soda and, I go speak at these college campuses, they live off of, chips and beer, basically, right? These college vegans that, don't care about their health, but they're doing it for global warming reasons or whatever. And you can eat a miserable diet, right? Whereas whole food, plant-based, that tells me actually what you do eat. Oh, you actually eat your vegetables. Aha, now we can, right? And so unfortunately, it's just not as informative. Plus, there is this kind of baggage that comes along with it. Whereas for your health, it doesn't matter whether you have a leather belt on or not, right? They have other things that come along with it. It's like an identity, as opposed to so if you're going to talk about vegan, I would prefer talking about vegan eating or a vegan meal, as opposed to vegan, the noun identity, because that sets up this kind of barrier. Okay. Well, I don't want to be a vegan necessarily, but I want to see my kids grow up and I want to be healthy. And okay. So the more and more, whole plant foods one can center their diets around, right? the better. And so it's a spectrum, right? So the largest study of plant-based eaters in the world actually used to be here in the UK until Adventus 2 took over this massive study in the States, particularly California and Canada. So following tens of thousands of people eating plant-based diets, and shows this kind of so they compared non-vegetarians to so-called semi-vegetarians or flexitarians, people eating meat more like a once-a-week basis rather than a daily basis, compared to pescatarians, those who eat no meat except fish, compared to ovo-lacto-vegetarians who eat no meat at all, compared to vegans who eat no meat, eggs, or dairy, and shows this kind of stepwise drop. Where each level is significantly lower disease risk for type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure and obesity, such that even lacto-ovo-vegetarians, at least in the States, are on average overweight. Their BMI is actually over 25. The only dietary group actually fitting ideal weight with those eating more strictly plant-based diets. So it's not black and white. It's not all or nothing. Any movement we can make along this spectrum towards eating healthy can accrue significant benefits. I think that's an important message to get.
Okay, you're a scientist, you're a doctor, so that makes sense. You're like, what you put in your mouth that's gonna make you live longer and healthier, as opposed to what belt you wear, as opposed to what you were. So you care about the facts and the science. Okay.
Right.
I went on a low salt diet. Actually, I was doing an ayahuasca ceremony, so I had to not eat a lot of foods, and I found that once I came back on it, I didn't really want the salt. And I didn't really want some of those foods. And the other thing that's happened to me with me lately is I've been doing a lot of body weight exercises, less of the lifting weights, and I found that I'm trending toward more of a vegetable-based diet. And also I'm listening to my gut a little bit more. Like if it hurts a little when I first eat it, why do I keep eating it? I don't know, are these just other symptoms? Do you think about this stuff, or do you go back to the science?
No, there's really nice feedback loops. I mean, it is all the science. I mean, so, that's why I encourage people to give it a try, right? Try it as like a free sample, right? Anyone can eat anything for a few weeks, right? In fact, you can eat nothing for a few weeks. I mean, so look, it's just, and so the thought of, wait a second, I can't eat pepperoni pizza for the rest of my life, like that's just mind blowing. People can't even consider that. And of course, that's not what I'm saying, but on a day-to-day basis, we want to eat healthy. But I said, no, give me 3 weeks, right? So 3 weeks, let's eat healthy, and I'll give you all these tips. And, in fact, there's this great 21-day Kickstart program run by an organization, a nonprofit called Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Starts at the first of every month. Hundreds of thousands of people done through it. It's a bunch of different languages. You sign up. It's all completely free. You do it as kind of a social media group. You all sign up together, and you share recipes, and you get daily tips and stuff. And first of every month, 21-day Kickstart. So I think it's 21daykickstart.org, something like that. So again, just giving people the hows to actually do it. Oh, but again, just 21. Just give it 20. And the thought is, look, 21 days, all of a sudden your taste buds are changing, the food is tasting better, and you're feeling better. Right? And so all of a sudden, your sleep is better. People are like, you doing? Oh, I'm fine. I'm young, healthy, have no symptoms. Then they thought they didn't have symptoms. They're like, my chronic indigestion went away. Like I just thought that was normal to just always feel bloated and gross after a meal. Like this but no, now, so my, bowel regulated, my periods are less painful. I mean, just like they just feel so much better. And so then they have this internal motivation. No longer is it like, a few decades down the road, you're not gonna have a stroke or something, but it's this internal, wow, I feel so much better. In fact, it's funny, when they do these studies, talk about science, often they do what's called an ABA design, where you put people, switch people to a diet, so you have before and after, and then you switch them back to make sure it was actually the diet. So you switch people from their regular diet to a special diet, and then you see changes. And then you want to say, wait a second, was that just coincidence that happened? So you switch them back to their original diet to see if indeed everything went back to normal. And so there's been these studies done where they switch people to a plant-based diet, right? So it's been done for like migraines and a bunch of different medical conditions, rheumatoid arthritis. So switch people for a couple of weeks, and then part of the study protocol, they have to go back to the original diet, because then, your joints feel better. We want to make sure your joints actually feel worse. And they refuse to do it. And so many study subjects refuse to go back to their original diet. It screws up the study. In fact, we have to throw out those people from the study because they violated the protocol. And so actually the science comes out and actually underestimates the fact, right? It's so powerful we can't even show it because they won't even finish the darn study. Because they just feel so much better. They're like, well, I'm not going back. Wait, I feel so much better. Wait, you crazy? You couldn't pay me to go back to the original diet. And so but you don't know until you give it a try, right? You don't know how good you can feel till you give it a try. And then you have the internal motive. Like, I feel better. Like, I don't care. So, and then all the science in the world, it's sort of like, well, I know how my body feels, and I feel better eating this way. And yeah, it's great that science shows it's going to reduce my risk of all this other stuff. But again, you don't know till you give it a try. So that's really what I encourage my patients to do.
I'm American, and growing up in America, I'm just wondering how we break this cycle of eating. You know, I still remember, how big is your steak? All these foods that almost seem like an American right to have my fries and to have my deep fried this and to have my this and to have my that. And, I watched this movie, Cowspiracy. I know you were in the sequel to that movie. And, when they asked him, they said, well, wait a second, you want me to reduce my shower volume of the water to save water? And they said, but what about not eating meat to save water? And everyone's like, well, we can't ask people to change their diet or they'll revolt. And because it's such a personal thing
really
to ask
is.
maybe an American to, or maybe anybody. But how do we change this cycle? And then on top of that, when my heart gets diseased, I go to my doctor. He writes a prescription for a statin that he basically, is promoted to do. It funds the medical industry. They put out a beautiful 90-second ad on TV about how it's going to make me happy. I mean, there's a crazy, vicious cycle going on here. How do we break that?
I mean, it's a very personal thing. I mean, talking about diet, it's like talking about religion, talking about politics. I mean, it's really deeply personal. It's like, basically, I'm saying, wait a second, you're telling me what my mother fed me was bad for me? Hey, don't get, let's not go.
Don't talk about my mother.
Don't talk about my mother. What were you? What? Right. So oftentimes, what I've done in my own practice is I start out not taking anything away. I just encourage to eat more healthy food. So I'm not taking anything away. It's like, okay, I want you to eat this every day, have a salad every day, and add these foods to your diet. I want you to eat this much fruit every day. And then they feel, they're not feeling deprived. Now they got too much food in hopes that you're kind of, there's only so much you can fit. There's only so many calories you can get in a day. And so you're hoping by, eating some of the healthiest foods, inspiring people to some of they just don't have enough room for some of the less healthy options at the end of the day. And so they can kind of start down that path. Okay. And then they start feeling healthier and they start getting a taste for these foods. They start experimenting with new foods. People have the sense that, like, what am I going to eat? It would constrict my diet. Whereas many people, actually, if you ask them, people tend to only eat 8 or 9 meals. On surveys, the average, people only tend to eat about 8 or 9 dinner meals. They just kind of rotate through. Really kind of a boring, restricted kind of reservoir of meat. And when actually you discover that there's this whole ocean of other possibilities out there, all sorts of neat ethnic cuisines, foods you never tried, that, you might actually like more than just the standard kind of, regular, I don't know, just different, flavors preparing. A lot of people, grew up, never knew what hummus was, or it's like, wow, this stuff is really good. And, and so it often ends up expanding people's repertoire. They're actually eating more interesting, more diverse diets than they ever were before, eating just kind of the standard American diet or the standard British Western diet.
So you try to encourage them to try some new foods and see.
Right. And do it at whatever pace is necessary to stick with it. It doesn't matter what you eat today or tomorrow or next week. It's what you're going to be eating 10 years from now, right? Yeah. And so go at whatever pace. It has to be affordable. It has to be delicious. It has to be convenient for you and your life, right? I mean, anyone can hold their nose and eat something they don't like for a couple days or a couple weeks, right? But then it's not going to be lifelong sustained, right? This is a lifestyle. It's a whole different way for you. So for the rest of your life, can you eat this way? If the answer is no, you got to keep trying foods. And then all of a sudden you find a breakfast, you're like, I never had steel-cut oats before. Wow, these are really good with berries and nuts. And wow, okay, I could see myself eating this way, this variety of really good food. Okay, so then you got you ticked off a box for, I've got a really good go-to breakfast. Okay, and then you're like, what are some lunch options that fit into my workplace or whatever? And look, if this takes weeks, if this takes months, we're talking about, your longevity. We're talking about adding years to your life. We're talking about adding healthy years to your life so you actually be productive to society, enjoy life, right? Healthy people have more fun. That's the message I want to give. Healthy people have more fun, right? For people, particularly young people, a lot of people, they may not have a close relative that's actually been really sick or actually seen somebody die. But see, we physicians, we're in the hospitals, right? We see how horrible the diseases, right? I mean, I take all my diabetics to a dialysis ward. Unless you've been to a dialysis ward, you don't know what it's like to lose your kidney function.
What's it look like?
So first of all, there's this stench of urine. You just can't get away from it because basically that's what you're doing. You're filtering out the urine because they no longer had kidney function.
Right.
And so people have to go there, and it's literally hours hooked up to this machine that cycles throughout their blood. and it's the most depressed, soul-crushing. In fact, the turnover at this place in terms of the employees, the staff, is so great just because it's just because everybody dies so quickly. In fact, the average life expectancy once you start dialysis is very short.
Wow.
Though most diabetics actually don't make it to dialysis because they die of heart disease first, because dialysis so increases your risk of heart disease. You have a heart attack before your kidneys function, but if kidney fail. But people don't realize, like, the loss of independence. Like, hospitals are horrible places to be. If you've never experienced that yourself, you just don't realize that whatever dreams you have, whatever you want to do with your life, you don't realize how cut short that would be by a disability. That all of a sudden, like, if you couldn't see, like, what would that mean for your life and your family? And like, and so, yeah, the vegans talk about global warming and animal welfare and all these kind of other external kind of altruistic, whatever. But no, I'm talking tangible benefits. Your life, what do you want to do? Like, what are your goals? And, how are you going to get there? And how can I? Look, it's your body, your choice. You want to smoke cigarettes? Want to go bungee jumping? It's your body, your choice. Do whatever you want. As a physician, all I can do is share with you what the predictable consequences of your actions are. If you continue to smoke, this is what's likely to happen to people in your circumstance,
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, and I'll see you on the inside.
They moved on to killer number 2, cancer, which is actually the number 1 killer here in Britain, where they took men with early stage prostate cancer, put them on the same kind of plant-based diet and lifestyle program that reversed heart disease, and saw for the first time ever a reversal of the progression of cancer. First time ever a diet's been shown in that randomized controlled trial. The people in the control group that didn't do anything special continued eating their regular diet that contributed to the cancer in the first place. Their cancer continued to grow. You can follow a biomarker called PSA, which roughly translates to tumor volume, which gets worse, worse, worse.